Hi, and welcome to the Selected Tech podcast, brought to you by a group of 4 MVPs doing webinars, sessions, and interviews on all things SharePoint, Office 365, and the Microsoft AI ecosystem. Their motto is learn, share, reuse. And here they are, Albert Jan, Rick, Stefan, and Tommy.
Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of Selected Tech. Today we're going to talk about Azure Logic Apps and Twitter because Appy has done some magic tricks to automate his tweets for, I guess, the CLI and stuff to make sure that, because people have to sleep. So he figured something out that he can also sleep a few days, a few hours a day. So Appy, show us what you did, man.
Typically, they say a lazy developer is a good developer, right? So
True.
at some point, I figured, okay, I'm doing a lot of stuff for CLI, and we figured that we wanted to do something around marketing. So not only developing new commands, but actually letting the world know that there are new commands. Makes sense. But then I was like, okay, we do commands. We do like 5 of them a week, and not sure if I want to every time I build a new command also figure out what I'm going to tweet about or how does that work. So what we ended up doing is we ended up looking at, okay, can we automate some part of it? So we still want to do tweets from within the PnP community, and I as a person still want to do tweets whenever I do something cool, but there are a few things that we wanted to get out there without me figuring out what the content should be. And one of the things is new commands. One of the other things is outstanding issues. So we want to do a weekly recap on how many good first issues we have. And I started playing around with Logic Apps, and it turns out that you can actually fairly easy tweet stuff with Logic Apps. And well, that's what I'm going to show today. I'm not sure why my webcam gets all fuzzy. Let me turn it off and on again. Yeah, that's better. Always helps. So first things first. I have a resource group with a bunch of content in there. There are a few Logic Apps, well, actually quite a few, and they're doing different things. But let's start with either CLI issues or the O-Teams issues. It's a fairly straightforward thingy. Once every, I don't know when, but let's say once every week, we want to tweet that there are open issues and that you can help out within the community and that you can actually help out a community initiative, either O-Teams or CLI issues. So if I look at the Logic App, it's actually just a few steps. So what it does is first you need a recurrence trigger. When do we want to do this? And this one actually runs every week on Friday morning. For me, you could pick any time slot you want. Then there is an HTTP call that calls the GitHub API. And what it does is it gets the issues from the generator teams project. And the state has to be open. And there have to be two labels attached, either the good first issue or the help wanted. Now, if I would get this one, you'll see that it's just JSON with all the labels, all the issues, all the links, all the stuff that's out there that you can actually iterate over or work with or do stuff with. There's no limit because once you have that content, you can actually work with it. Now, in my scenario, what I wanted to do is I just wanted to tweet the amount of issues that we have. So I create an array, and in that array, there are actually three random tweets that I could choose from. There is some tweet content, and then the only thing that I do in there is give the length of the amount of issues that I've got. So I've got an array with issues. So here it says, oh no, we have an amount of good issues. You can help out. Sharing is caring. And there is this link to the PnP generator. And then the next step is going to be actually tweeting that. And in order to make it feel a little bit random, what we do is we pick the output of compose, and we picked a random number between 0 and 2, meaning 0, 1, and 2, meaning I get a random tweet of the above tweets that are in this command. So what this will do, this will tweet a semi-random tweet because there are only 3 to choose from, and it will let us know, okay, there are outstanding issues. Now, if I look at the CLI one, you will see that it's pretty much the same, except If I go here, you see that the URL to get issues is different. We're now getting the CLI project. We're having the same labels because we're using the same labels over pretty much any PNB project. Helps out. And then within the compose, there are slightly different tweets. I actually have 5 different tweets in here. And then as you can see, it's again just posting tweets. And then if I go to the history, you will see that if I would pick the history for the get issues, I actually get a bunch of JSON returns. And then if I go to my compose, you'll see that it counts up to 21 issues. So I have an array with, explanation of, okay, we've got 21 issues. And then it picks that random tweet. So it will tweet, did you know we have 21 good first issues? And that's basically all there is to send a tweet with a logic app. Now, if I go back, you can actually do more than just tweeting. You can also send a LinkedIn message. Now, what we did for the CLI is we figured out that we wanted to tweet about new commands. We wanted to tweet out some samples, and we wanted to really share what we already had. So what we did there is I wrote a really small script to iterate through our documentation. And let me see if I have that running on my machine. Get me 1 second. Tweet generator. Yeah, there we go. Pick up my code if it wants to open. Sometimes Visual Studio Code gets a bit slow. Don't know why. There we go. Wrong monitor.
Yep.
There we go. It should be the right monitor. So this is a small script. There's nothing really fancy in there. Basically, what this does is if I go here, it has a URL, a root path, so you can actually see where everything is running on my desktop. And then I have a bunch of random messages. And what I do is I pick up all our MD files, which are all documentation. Then for each link in the documentation, each command, I just generate a new tweet. And what I do is I put every one of those tweets into a tweets.csv file. And if I go to this one, you will actually see that I have a bunch of tweets for any commands with a randomized message. Now, this message might not necessarily be semantically correct. As you can see here, disable specified Microsoft Flow. That's not really a tweet, but then I at least have some resemblance of what it's doing. So I get the description of the command, I get the actual command to run, and I get a URL to the documentation. So this is something that I can then use when I'm writing tweets saying, okay, this is what it's about. And here you can see this one actually has a more descriptive set of content, so gets information about the specified run of a specified Microsoft Flow. So if I'm writing a tweet, then I can, let's say, reuse this for 80 or 90%, add some emojis, add some hashtags, and then the tweet itself would be good. So
that info is that coming from the PR that somebody commits, or
no? This is actually coming from our docs. So
okay.
If I go to, I think I can open that. Let me open a new tab. /CLI and 365. No, do this. There we go. So if you pick our documentation, then there's always the header is always the command option, and then the first paragraph is always a description on what the command is doing. And you can see like login is not really added value, but if I go to planner plan add, then it adds a new Microsoft Planner plan. If I go to, I don't know, SharePoint Framework Doctor, then it verifies environment configuration. So this is actually something I could use in a tweet. So I just get everything from the documentation. The reason I put it in a small script like this is because I also want to generate an image. And the image that I want to generate is actually just a standardized background image. And then I want to add the command on top of that. So if I go to my images and I would pick a random, let me pick this one. So this is actually a sample script that it would do. But if I would pick another one, this one is wrong. This one, here you can see that it's the command added to a background image, and that's basically it. 1 second. So yeah, the cat is I don't know what he's doing, but it didn't sound good. So I now have a bunch of images, and I've got a bunch of sample tweets that are like 80% reusable or usable. Now, the next step that I did is I actually created a SharePoint list, and within that SharePoint list, I added a few columns that I could use. I have a title, a tweet date, an image pad, and a tweet. Now, this image pad, or if I would edit it, then the image pad actually refers to a image library where I uploaded those images, and I can set a tweet date, and I can set the tweet that I want to schedule. Now, what the Logic app then does is if I look to the CLI social, let me pick that one, then again, recurrence. This one actually runs every 5 hours. So that means that it randomly tweets every 5 hours if there is something to tweet for that date. Good thing about that is that it makes sure that I tweet in every time zone because, well, I could say everything should be GMT +1, but that doesn't work for, I don't know, 80% of the world that is looking at different time zones or is working in different time zones. So if I go back, then I get my tweets. So this just looks at a SharePoint list, the CLI tweet list, where I say, okay, give me everything where the tweet date actually matches our current date and then is not already tweeted. So this would return outstanding tweets that are not yet tweeted. Then if there are any items, so if my length is actually greater than 0, then I can get the file contents because I want to get the image. And then instead of just posting the body, the tweet, I also going to add a image to that content. And then finally, I'm going to update that item saying, okay, I tweeted and I select or I changed the Boolean to true. So now in my SharePoint list, I actually have a list. If I would go to my all items, you would see anything that's not yet tweeted. If I go to my input, I can see everything that has been tweeted before. So if I would sort on older to newer, you can see that there is a bunch of tweets that I tweeted like 2 months ago. And yes, it's tweeted. Everything went well. So we're all good here. Now, this is tweeting. You could do pretty much the same stuff for sharing a LinkedIn post. So if I go here, LinkedIn, we're doing a little bit less often. So instead of doing it once every day or every 5 hours, we, for LinkedIn, say, okay, we're going to do it every 11th hour. And then we schedule one only for, I think for Wednesday or for Thursday. Again, I'm going to get those tweets and I'm going to say, there we go. Then I'm going to say, okay, want to make sure that I still have items. And then if there are items, then I'm going to share a company update through LinkedIn. I'm going to say, this is the content URL. It's visible. This is the company. So we share it on the M365 patterns and practices page. Then we want to share an image URL. And if you want to share something on LinkedIn, the image URL should be anonymously accessible. So I put all my images also on a blob container, and I actually have a background job running every time I upload an image to that SharePoint image library. It's also automatically put to that blob container, so I don't have to worry about stuff not being there. But instead of me getting the image and having to pass in a stream, all I need to do is to make sure that this URL is available, and that's it. And then you have to specify a title and a body, as a LinkedIn post is slightly different than a tweet. But yeah, you get the gist. This will get pushed to LinkedIn and actually shared. Then there is one final scenario. What we also do is we also wanted to share stuff on a weekly basis on what we did with the CLI. So we do a weekly recap on content that we generated. The thing is that we couldn't, or I couldn't really figure out a way to automate the tweeting of it, but I also didn't want to spend too much time on it. So what we did with that is we actually created a Logic app as well, where we said, okay, what we do is we run this every week on Friday. then we get all pull requests where we say sort by updated. So any the last updated pull requests are on top. Then we filter that result set on the last 7 days. And the way you do that is you can filter an array, you can pass in the results, and then you'll need to format the closed add option as a datetime. So then you can do is greater than, and here add days -7s mean anything that's closed in the last 7 days stays in my filtered result set. Then for my filtered result set, what I wanted to do is I wanted to create a small HTML table where we say, this is the title, this is the body, this is the URL, and then send myself an email saying, okay, go ahead, this has been closed in the last 7 days. Meaning I don't have to go to GitHub and sort or filter or create a query. I now get a weekly recap in my email. And if I go here, you can see, okay, I've sent an email and there is some content in there. You see all the pull requests. So I can quickly see, oh, we closed these 5 issues, and I can craft my tweet saying, hey, this is the weekly highlight for CLI. So for me, playing around with trying to automate as much as possible with Logic Apps was really, really fun. All of a sudden I'm doing way too much marketing, not writing code anymore, but still it's fun to try and tweet or automate stuff that you want to do because it makes sense to share content and make your life a little bit easier. Questions?
Questions. I now that you showed component after component after component after component, I'm like, yeah, it's just a small script I created here. That's massive. Or I mean,
it started out with like one Logic app, and what I tried to do is, so I actually started with the summary one first. And that's like 3 blocks in a Logic app. I was like, oh, this is easy. I could tweet automatically as well. So then I started with doing the CLI issues. And then once that was in place, we're like, oh, maybe I can create a SharePoint list. And I think Louise Fries also did a blog post about how she did it. She uses, I think, a similar setup, except she pushes to Buffer. So there are quite a few people out there who are doing it somewhat similar. So I feel that it is a lot. It's like, I don't know, 2, 4, 6, like 8 different Logic apps doing stuff. But it's not that you have to create them all 8 at once. You could just say, okay, it's important for me to, I don't know, tweet about a specific topic that I've blogged about before. Then it might make sense to schedule 1 tweet a week. And if you create your Logic app to schedule 1 tweet a week, then the step to do 2 or 3 tweets a week or a tweet a day actually is really small. So for my own blog, I just created a new one last Friday. I figured, okay, I've been writing blog posts for, I don't know, 10 years. And there still is content that might be a little bit older, but I'm still proud of, or I want to reshare because I feel it still has added value. So what I did is I created actually a copy from the CLI one. And what I now did is I just put in all my blog posts. And if I would filter, I also put in all our selected tech webinars. And it's not tweeting, it's just sitting in a list. But now that I have this list, I try to spend, I don't know, 5 minutes on Friday figuring out, okay, are there blog posts or webinars that we did in here that I feel like resharing? And we could say, okay, maybe, okay, we did a webinar on setting up your dev environment. It's, for me, it's not weird to, I don't know, retweet it once a year. And they're like, I don't know, like 100 different items. So I can tweet something every week for the upcoming 2 years with content we already created or content that we already did. And there might be content in there that's, I don't know, getting old. I mean, I also had some XSLT blog post on SharePoint 2007. I'm not going to retweet that.
Yeah, sure.
There are other blogs that are still valid.
For 100% for sure. What I actually meant was like, for you, it's this iteration, like, okay, it was a small script and then you added and added, and for
Yeah.
you it's still this small thingy. If you told us before what you're gonna show, and it's like tenfold bigger than you made out of it like an hour ago. So like,
Yeah,
okay,
sorry.
that was like a couple of evenings. This wasn't just like 1
No.
or 2 hours. So it was step by
No,
step by step and by step. Yeah, it's really cool.
So the very first iteration for tweeting on CLI commands, I actually spent, I don't know, like 2 hours a week figuring out what's the tweet going to be, generating an image. And I was like, okay, I've been doing it like 5 times, meaning 10 hours. Like, okay, I could also spend like a day's worth of work to generate the image, generate the tweet. And then once it's there, you never have to look at it again. So that script, maybe I'm going to touch it once a year to tweak it a bit, or because we change our documentation. But now I can just generate a bunch of tweets, pick out the top commands or the things that we want to reshare, and then we're good. So
and how did you? I mean, how did you test especially the post to Twitter or tweet part? Because you need to see the results, and you probably don't want to use your main account. So I guess you would create a test account or something like that and post with that, or
no. What I did is I created a blank logic app, and I did the post to Twitter command, and I just put in a tweet that I actually wanted to tweet. So that way I knew how the command would interact.
Okay.
Then I wrote everything, put in my main account. Everything worked flawlessly, except 3 things. From the default logic app Twitter connection, you cannot reference other people. So if I do an add Tommy, it wouldn't recognize you. It would strip that out. I only figured it out once I think it was running for like 3 weeks. And I was like, hey, I'm missing something there. The second thing that I kind of screwed up the first time was the way I put in images. I figured if I put in an image URL, it would work, but you actually have to put in a stream. And I was like, okay, the first tweet with an image, I saw that happening, and I was like, okay, yeah, shit happens. That's life.
Yeah.
And
that can happen.
And then the last thing that I recently saw is that I currently do not check whether the stuff that I'm trying to tweet actually fits within a Twitter message that's like 160 characters, I think. So I don't do any validation. So I had I have 5 tweets that weren't tweeted, and it's like, oh, try again. And then like 2 weeks later, they were still there. I was like, something is going wrong. I see the same tweets popping up
again.
And I was like, oh, wait a minute. They're like 200 characters. That makes sense. So
I thought Twitter removed that limit, no?
I don't know. There is still some.
No, there's a limit, but it's a little bit 160, 180 characters, and not 140
something
anymore.
Like that. So what I probably should have done in my SharePoint library is add a limit on my column, or I don't know, within my logic app, check whether if it's too long, don't tweet, or send a message saying, hey, your tweet is not good.
An inline function that makes a string length, and then you can make some fancy red alert thingy.
Yeah, something like that would be fun. And the final thing, what's really interesting, by default, if you tweet, so let me pick one of the tweets that I did. Not sure where to click. Everything is new. So if you pick this one, you see that it actually gets tweeted as Microsoft Azure Logic App. That's because we're using the out-of-the-box connection. So what you could do is, if you go to your Logic App configuration, and if I would pick that CLI summary, if I go to my API connections, you see that I put in the API connection to Office 365 Twitter, which makes sense. Oh, this one is actually mailing. Sorry, wrong one. So let me pick this one. If I go to my API connections, you see that I've got Twitter. And if I go to my Twitter, then I can actually edit this. So I can do edit API connection. And then by default, you pick the use shared application. That's like a definition done by Microsoft. You can also bring your own application, but that means that you will have to maintain your own application as well. But if you're using your own application, you can set that send from display message. So you can come up with your fancy name or fancy application. If you would do it from buffer, it would show that it's shared from buffer. Yeah. And
That's
then one thing that I played around with is I'm not really good at list designs. There's no war horses in here, but I figured, okay, I want to do some filtering, but I also wanted to play around with making it look a little bit more fancy. So I created a small timeline based on a sample that's in the PMP community. So I can actually see, okay, these are tweets, this is the title of the tweet, this is the actual tweet, and you could potentially show dates or stuff. But yeah, wanted to play around with making it look fancy.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, it's
Really cool, yeah.
Some minor UI issues, but it's fun to play around with and get some experience with what you can achieve with the new list experience.
And one step back, logic apps. You picked it licensing reasons or just because you like them? Okay, now.
Yeah. So I did everything in Flow for tweeting, and then I was like, I want to get stuff from GitHub. There is no RSS feed. I can only do an HTTP call. HTTP is premium. Back to logic apps.
Yeah, for stuff like that, it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the only downside of logic apps from, let's say, a developer experience is that if I want to share this with someone else, then they need to have some experience in Azure. If you're using Flow, then the user interface is a bit friendlier. But you can, I think you can learn logic apps if you've done Flow. It's not too hard. It might be that there are a few other buttons that you just don't want to look at. And one of the things that I really like about the logic app stuff is the clone option. So you can really quickly clone something. So now that I have that tweet from a SharePoint list, I can just copy that SharePoint list, do clone from my logic app, and have a completely new separate instance running, doing whatever I want it to do.
Can you I don't know if it's still valid, but can you just share or allow people to create logic apps without seeing anything else in Azure? Because that was a couple of years ago already the concern that it's easier to bring, let's say, citizen developers to Flow because there's only Flow and there's not the whole Azure part around it. And with Azure, you always at least in a productive tenant, depending on the rights or the permissions, it always feels like you are close to operating on a open heart surgery or something like that.
Yeah, so potentially what you could do is you could create the logic app and create a blank logic app, give people control over your logic app, but then they would still see that left navigation where there is stuff like logic app code view. And if you click it, I'm happy with it, but I can imagine that if you're a citizen developer, you're like, holy crap, what is this? I don't want to see this. Go away. And then it's right below the logic app designer. And here you're like, oh, this actually makes some sense. But yeah, that is a bit tricky. One of the things that is fancy about logic app is that you could have different versions. So you could see, okay, this is the versions that I've been working on. You can actually restore a version. So if something is changed, you could refix that. You have all in all, it works pretty much the same as Flow, but you have some other controls.
It looks a little bit more developerish, and
it definitely is a little bit more developerish.
But still, the licensing part is so much easier.
Yeah, and then if I look at what this sets me back, let's do cost analysis.
A few cents, I guess.
Yeah, I think I spent like 50 cents. 30 cents a month on this. And then the biggest chunk of cost is actually this one. And that's not something I've shown, but I've been capturing all RSS posts that Microsoft does for Microsoft 365 into table storage. I figured, I don't know why, but I wanted to do something with AI, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm going to post everything in there. And I've been capturing it for a year. So this now is a year worth of Microsoft block content into some table storage and a logic app that processes that. So 6 cents, I can live with that.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
So you just need to find a way to make a product out of it and then sell it.
I'm not a product developer. I'm just happy with automating my own work.
Can you do that? Like download logic apps and then start selling them? Templates?
Well, a logic app itself
You can export that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but are you allowed to sell that export?
I'm allowed to sell anything, right?
Be careful. We talked about that before.
Okay. There are some limitations, but I'm pretty sure that I'm allowed to sell IP that is configured in Azure, as long as I don't put in any Microsoft names in there.
Could be.
Yeah, but
But
it's really.
that's it.
Yeah, if you look at it, I mean, of course, if you just look at Buffer or whatever other tool, from a feature point, you're not really lacking anything, or really not the major things. Of course, with scaling and making available to different users and all the authentication, of course, there's a ton of things to do. But from the get core, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it
what I
doesn't
like
look as
about
fancy, but okay.
Yeah. What I like about Buffer is that it does a lot of stuff like telling you, oh, you should tweet at that point, or you should recraft your tweet to contain this or that. And that's something that's absolutely not in there. But for CLI, it's a community initiative. We're not spending money on it, or we try to not spend money on it. I'm not going to spend $10 a month just for community. I mean, that's just not worth it for me. But I still do want to share some of the goodies that we have.
I think that Hans Brenda is, I don't know if he's still using it, but I think he's still using it. He created an Excel file and uses, I think, if this then that, to automate his tweets.
Yeah.
And he basically has a list, I think, of 50 or 60 tweets, and then he has thought of different time zones. So he, I think, has an array of hours, and then he randomly generates the minutes. And basically creates a time window saying, okay, I want to tweet between, I don't know, 6 and 9, and then pick a number and then create a tweet and send it like that. So and you're not really far away from that.
So one of the things that's now on my list, if I ever find time again, is what I do now here is we say, okay, at this hour, at this minute, here, obviously, I could do a random number as well between 0 and 60, and then I would have random numbers. And I could do the same for hours. I could say, okay, I'm going to randomize between, I don't know, 8 and 12 or something like that.
Yeah, you can create like a time frame for EMEA, APAC, US, and then randomize the time in there, because I think you get in trouble if you always post at the same time, or isn't Twitter the same? You can't post the same content twice.
Yeah, so you can post the same content twice. They create hashes of your tweet. That's actually one of the things that I screwed up the very first time. I tweeted something, it was not good. I deleted the tweet and then spent 30 minutes debugging why my tweet wasn't working until I actually read the message stating this tweet already has been sent, and I was like,
okay, they kept the hash. Okay, yeah. So you need to create a random string in the end of it.
Yeah.
Thank you, algorithm XYZ.
That's life.
Yeah, but really cool.
Yeah, pretty happy with the results. And
nice example.
Well, it's good to see it's good to reshare some CLI and Teams love.
True that. I think with that we call it a day. So
sounds good.
See you hopefully next week.
See you
Yeah,
all
see you
next
guys.
week.
Works out. See ya.
See you around.
Hopefully we
Bye.
see each other live next week.
Yeah, that's the
Yeah,
idea. Yeah, yeah.
Definitely.
let's
Cool.
hope so.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Right.
See ya.